Good morning, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here chairing this session so we can hear about the plans for the new Museum of London site in Smithfield. And I'm going to hand over to Sharon Ament. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Well, you'd expect the director of the museum to go a little bit back into history. And so here we have the famous, or should I say infamous, rotunda being built. The Museum of London came together from two organisations, the old Guildhall Museum and the London Museum. And this project was conceived sometime in the 60s and eventually was built in the 70s, opened in 1976. I'm going to talk about our current site because many of the characteristics of our current site determined our desire to radically change it. We thought about rebuilding on our current site and then more latterly moving to Smithfield because we have a lot of inherent problems. The Museum of London at London Wall was built by Powell, Moyer and Partners with exhibition designers Higgins, Ney and Partners. Now it's important that I mention the exhibition designers because we will be in our new project going hand in hand to build a very strong partnership with the architects, exhibition designers, content and place. And it's going to be this kind of magical combination of these three elements which will make the new museum at West Smithfield truly sing and create a new sense of a museum and what museums can be. Here we have here we are, London 1976. Smoke is spewing out over Tate Modern. You can see the inherent compromises that had to be accommodated in the development of the museum as it wraps around the Ironmongers Hall. And the rotunda was put at that crossroads, that junction, to accommodate the vast hordes of traffic which you can see whizzing around the streets. Since then, a whole CBD has built up around us, and we are truly overlooked and hemmed in by a very vibrant part of London, but not a part of London that necessarily is a natural place for visitors to come to, particularly at weekends. So I think this slide really does sum it up. Really, from the beginning, as you can see, the true inaccessibility of the roundabout, interesting that even from those early days, the issues to do with the museum were apparent. And if you're really interested, do dig out a copy of the Architectural Review July 1977 edition, and you'll see what John Harris, the then curator of the Reba Gallery, had to say about the museum build and them in terms of its difficulty. Since then, of course, there have been, since the first director of that new building, Max Hebditch, who is still a great friend, there has been 4 directors, of which I am the last. Last one, who's going to take it on to West Smithfield. They have been trying hard to create an accessible building which truly shows the magnificence of our collections. And the last major intervention was in 2010 when we opened the Galleries of Modern London. Since the early picture of the inaccessible rotunda, the directors have fought hard to put in escalators, lifts, bridges, and all sorts of mechanisms to get people into our museum. Just 3 years ago, we attracted 615,000 visitors. And visitors have been a big focus for us in all their manifestations. Now, 3 years later, last year we had 1.25 million visitors. And we're starting to burst at the seams with people. We've got about 800,000 people coming to our London Wall site. It is important, as you can imagine, the Museum of London needs to connect and wants to connect with the many different sorts of communities, people, families, overseas visitors, Londoners, people who live in the rest of the UK. It's really important for us to tell the story of London. And we do that by putting out and by discussing and using our collection, not least of which are 20,000 dead Londoners. We've got the single largest collection of a population over time, which means that we are used and by researchers from all over the world. So people really are at the core of what our story is about, and will be at the core of what the new museum at West Smithfield will be about. From Londoners to the kind of passions of Londoners. This, I don't know whether any of you are familiar with this view of life. This is a kind of passion from a chap who, for many years, protested, or kind of used in a very gentle way, this kind of protest on the streets of London. But we are about not only history, we have a fantastic historical collection, but we collect we collect the manifestations of contemporary London, and we are absolutely looking to the future. And that real shift is a shift in our museum and will be expressed in the new museum at West Smithfield. We will be grounded in history. The past is kind of all around us and is happening all the time, if you see what I mean. But the contemporary, the present and the future is absolutely what we're about. And thinking about how we can create a forum for Londoners, for people who live in urban environments, to think about their city and to contribute to their city is very important to us. In March 2015, so just last year, we declared our interest in the Smithfield site. It kind of fell into our laps after a kind of turbulent history that you will be very familiar with. And it fell into our laps because our landlord and sponsor is the Corporation of London, along with the GLA. They are the landlords of the London Wall site and the owners of the West Smithfield site. And it felt that we could solve a lot of problems by moving to that site. We undertook a site options appraisal. So we like doing things. Our mantra is to do things really well and to do them properly. The site options appraisal panel objectively assessed rebuilding on the London Wall site, doing nothing, of course, or minor interventions, and relocating to West Smithfield. And because of its connectivity, its history, its deep richness of character, the opportunities of accessing and connectivity via Crossrail, and the kind of physicalities of the building, which are almost kind of absolute opposites to the building we inhabit today, we chose the West Smithfield site. It gives us a huge range of opportunity. It's a complex building with a deep history, which is very, very different from the place that we inhabit now. Recent history during the war has seen some damage to those buildings and rebuilding of them. It's always been a place. It is adjacent to it is a working wholesale trade, meat trading market, and for 1,000 years it has been on the site of a gathering place, a marketplace, the place of St Bartholomew's Fair. The Fleet River runs down Farringdon. The great Victorian interventions rebuilt the market, mechanised trading and the importation of meat. Very, very evocative for a museum. And we're left with the vestiges of this in the general market. You'll see more about the complexities of the site when Paul and his colleagues talk about it. Important to us, because we're a museum, deep in our DNA is how we connect with the public engagement. So part of this process is all about asking people and connecting with people, particularly around the development of the project. And we kicked this off again last year with this campaign called We Are London. And we've been asking people for over a year, and we'll continue to ask people what they will put in a new museum. Philippa and Grayson Perry would put a council flat, one that is inhabited. Other people have given us great ideas, such as a kebab shop. Once people move away from the kind of notions of a London bus or a taxi, they really get deep into thinking about what should go into a new museum, what sums up London. During the process, we kicked off the architectural competition, and as Pat said, we had 500 initial expressions of interest, 71 first stage submissions, which we got down to 6 great designers. We have been publicly talking about those options since they were made public. And this is just a way, and this is our objective, as always, to go over and above in terms of public consultation, even though we're not in any formal public consultation stage. So this is pictures of an event at Asif Janice near West Smithfield, a breakfast event. We had 90 odd people there, including some we dragged off the street. And this is an image of the exhibition at the museum, again, where we're asking people for their comments and showing all the designs. So it's really, we are using our own talents to bring this project to the public's attention and to engage them. We are at the end and the start of a process. We're at the end of the architectural competition, which was orchestrated very ably by Malcolm Redding Associates. This is a picture of the expressions of interest and tender brief. We were really pleased with Simon's view of that process in the Evening Standard, and we've been very pleased with the responses to the publicity so far. I'm Sharon Ament, that's how you can get hold of me, but now I'm going to hand over to Paul, who will tell you more about the design. Brilliant.
Today, hopefully, we can try to clarify exactly that complexity and really why our scheme developed as it has done. And really, the worry, obviously, in the architectural world, we all know there are a lot of architects there at the moment. Unfortunately, too many people, actually, their opinions rest only on CGIs. And I think from our point of view, and I'm sure the other architects involved, it's actually is the sort of organising framework of the museum as well. We had quite a complicated brief. It was a clear brief that was drawn up. And we had square metres that were looked for. And there's an organisation and a structure that the Museum of London were looking for that we feel we have managed to invest in our schemes here at the moment. So it's not just about the CGIs, it's actually the orchestration of the space and how people move through the space, how not only people move through, but obviously the staff as well, and of course the objects and the research side of it as well. And then you have the school parties. It's a hugely complex project that what we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes will not do it justice at all. But I think the other thing we should clarify is that whatever we show you now, we haven't had the time, and I think Sharon said, the discussion really starts now. So from our point of view, this was an approach we put forward. This is how we would start looking at the phenomenal architecture. The buildings are wonderful. Our approach to that, Julian Harrop is here as well. The urban landscape around it, which Joe is going to talk about a little bit as well. So I kick off. This, are you all, I'm assuming now, this was really interesting. For our interview, We were on at 8:30 in the morning. I don't know what it is about this project. You know, this is sort of, actually sort of does my head in today, because it's another 8:30, and we're thinking, how, when you present at 8:30 in the morning, do you actually stimulate a group of people? Now, I'm not saying you, but I mean, at the time, the question mark was about the panel that we had, and you're sitting there, and you have the Simon Jenkins of the world, and obviously Sharon, her team as well. Anyway, we started off, and I just talked a little bit about the view of our team in terms of how we responded. And I was saying that when we first visited this site, which was phenomenal, and you start moving inside, we were totally blown away by the physicality of it. I mean, it took us. I mean, it really, we knew then that physicality, whatever scheme was developed, that had to be harnessed and not lost. And I think that texture and richness is hopefully, obviously it has to be embedded in the final scheme. You'll get a little bit in the CGIs now, the scheme, but the site itself, the scheme we're talking about, and part of the scheme, is the general market building. The poultry market, which was burnt and rebuilt by Arup in the 60s, in fact, it's not the upper part, it is the underneath part, the basements of that building. So we have here the fish market as well, and the Red House, and there's an engine house just here. So we have Charterhouse Road, we have Smithfield West here, Smithfield Road, Snow Hill, and of course the Farringdon Road. And then we have obviously Crossrail being developed here. So we're talking about an amazing site, part of, as Sharon said, an operating market. So from one, importantly, you'll see there is also an underground rail track running straight through here, and they've got the Fleet River running by the side there. This is all quite important in terms of how our scheme developed. Now I'm going to really hand over to Joe quickly, because this is obviously the location of the site and the sort of cultural hub that, I'm sorry for you people, I'm pointing over here. It's always the problem here. We've got these 3 slides. I'm never quite sure which one you respond to. If you can look on the slide, we developed, we understood the sort of the culture, the power. We called this the expanded museum, because this is not just a building sitting on this rich, it has this rich environment. It picks up on the Barbican, and then we have the finance and history and the text. So we're in, urban-wise, we're in an amazingly rich environment. That circle in a square represents the general market, and this really is where we felt our story begins in terms of locating and creating a new centre for the City of London. But perhaps, Joe, you can just touch on the sort of geology and the sort of geography of the site.
Thanks. Good morning. I think we must all remember that actually the fundamental identity of London is built out of its geology. It's built out of its own hydrology, out of the Thames and all its tributaries. And it is this geology and the particular climate here that gives us this phenomenal soil. And this soil is extraordinary, because this is why the Museum of London has such amazing artifacts, is because, as we know today, we're kind of undergoing an enormous amount of development in London. And in a sense, it's a big dig that's going on. Crossrail is one of those, and the station actually has 2 entrances. One is at one end of Smithfield, and the other is right at the other end. That's how big it is. But, you know, we're talking about 128 million cubic meters of soil being taken out of those tunnels. Now, that soil, this good old London clay, is phenomenal in terms of its ability to preserve artifacts. And you've probably all seen that there's been some amazing finds recently which date back to the Romans and various commentary about the dastardly deeds of the merchants and so on in London at that time. So kind of no change there. And today there's an army of archaeologists in various sites across London, and what is being revealed to us all is this extraordinary sort of layer cake, you know, which is up to 30 foot or 7 meters deep, of different stages of London's story. And this is fundamental. This connects us back, and enables us to look forward. So we're just, all of us, really just passing players in all of this long-running history. And so that what is termed ground level or datum on this project is an interesting question. And there you see the dot, which is the Museum of London, located within the Geology of London, right there. And it's pretty much central, so it's fantastic. We've got the east and the west, north and the south, all coming together. We're on the Fleet, as Paul said. That has its own flood risk. It sits in a beautiful culvert there, and you can hear it if you're in the basement. I mean, phenomenal. Our ground level of our basement may well have been the street level of Roman times. So, you know, in terms of exploring past, present, future, us as a community going way back and then moving forward, this is an incredible local, national, and international project. So Paul's just going to go into the scheme, and then I'll pick up on the public realm in a minute.
Okay, this is a very quick tour. This, more or less, I have to say, is the slides we presented to the Museum of London at our interview. This is the first time it's been shown otherwise. So here we have the general market, and we have Horace Jones's piece. That's the dome, and we actually said the dome is now going to, and this is all sort of abstract, the new centre of the City of London. What we said then is this is a museum that can evolve, and I think the important thing that we all realise, and this comes across, is certainly there's a profound shift in the expectations of museums and the behaviour of museums going people. Their experience and their own views, social media is something that is very much a part of the experience. It's interesting. Tate 2 is a very good example of that. Herzog de Meuron talk about a vertical promenade. Anyway, here we said that if we were to clear the marketplace itself and create this new floor space for the public, we actually put the museum underground, in this sort of this basement area. I'll show you some images in a moment, and we create a new public house. Sharon talks a lot about this being their soapbox, and I think this really is where we said at that ground level, Bath Museum, here we have a chance to have retail units, incubator units. It can actually draw in the sort of the environment and the people from around. So this very much is something that draws on the Smithfield itself and the city and the finance quarters beyond. Here you get an idea of where we said in this sort of surrounding crust of the market, there's the possibilities of having some wonderful people inhabiting these parts. We were suggesting a pub. We haven't suggested a council house, but clearly that's not necessarily impossible. But you can see the adjacencies. We thought Save next to NLA was be a very good. They could learn from each other, I think, and you could then start bringing in a lot of the design colleges, architecture schools, and this really is this sort of. We call it a public house because historically this is really where all this sort of dialogue took place. Again, they're ideas at this stage. So here, a cross-section, east, west, you've got the general market and the poultry market. You've got and we're saying that instead of inhabiting that with any of the collection, you put the permanent collection, the design, underground. Now, there are a couple of reasons there. One, this idea, this notion of actually moving down underground. I don't know what you feel. We actually said that, and this is whether or not, this is something that was said on the day, I said on the day, our design begins with a single idea that the dome of the general market exactly marks the new centre of London, and a circular aperture in the floor directly under the dome marks the museum entrance. Conceived as a portal then into London's past, the visitor descends into the museum via a spiral escalator, and we are suggesting that we do turn this into an amazing event. But I think, and this is where we strongly feel that evoking the sort of magic, it's sort of similar to Narnia and the sort of back of a wardrobe. You actually, you know, that sense of moving through into something special. The Museum of London is all about storytelling, and I think that's what we wanted to convey certainly at this stage, is that there can be, the public can come in and have a sense of being inspired by the way they move through these spaces. So this sort of physical experience of actually moving down, and I did, you know, we say here the sedimentary layers, which is something Joe talks about. You know, this is all, and mirrors a sort of primordial sort of reflex to dig. I know my son, you know, when we moved into our house many years ago, we had our first garden. The first thing he did is to pick up an old shovel and start digging a hole. You know, at the age of 2, there's something invested in us. Actually moving down into this collection we felt is very strong. Now that's one big decision we took very early on. But I think importantly as well is by using the environment underground, which is far more stable, it makes much more sense from an environmental point of view to actually put this into this sort of more controlled environment. So we made 2 big moves. First of all, keeping the market general open, so the future of how the museum develops, it can develop in many ways, and then actually putting the temporary exhibition space underneath the poultry market. And of course, the wonderful thing is that any visitor will be able to walk through the meat markets, through the poultry markets, into the, you know, the museum will now be embedded in a market culture as well. So the market is still operating, functionally, which we think is special. We then, there's what's called the Western Poultry Avenue, a link there. We're saying we actually enclose that and form a new opening that drops down into the temporary exhibition space. So at this stage, we're saying you've got a permanent collection and a temporary exhibition collection. And when the team from the Museum of London were taking us around the museum, as it is at the moment, how many of you have been recently, but it's a sort of circular route. And I think the one thing that we felt they were keen on not doing was they wanted the option of being able to pick and choose which sort of historic time zone you move into. And because of the scale of this permanent exhibition space allows that to happen. It can be a linear route or many different routes. So here we have the general market. This is the fish market and the Red House building. Now, I think one point I want to bring up here, sorry if you're over here, this is the East Poultry link that we're enclosing here and forming an opening here. We're proposing to raise the dome, which at the moment when you'll see, it's quite a flat dome. We're looking to put a collar in here, almost a clerestory to allow light to drop down to focus more on here, because Horace Jones obviously designed a much taller dome originally. But you'll see on slides there is a link from the general market, this is along West Smithfield, to the fish market and access. And we're saying that actually we take that entrance and actually move it here to align the two. We've studied the quality of the existing entrance area, and Julian can talk about that perhaps a little bit more, and felt there's a strong case for forming the new opening here, and so we get this very clean link and this geometry between. This is the canopy that's existing at the moment. And you can see here this portico, how it hits like awkwardly. This is the fish market elevation, which is there. That's the canopy itself. So very quickly, these are one or two images that's within the general market itself. That's the dome as it stands at the moment. And our proposal there is we form that collar at that upper level, so we lift the dome. And again, it looks a fairly ethereal image, and clearly there's all the richness of the existing architecture obviously would come through, and there would be a vast restoration element here, but forming this opening right underneath the dome that takes you down into the sort of bowels of the new museum. And what's interesting, when we talk about scale, this is nearly twice the size of the Natural History Museum entrance. I don't know how many people have been to functions there. It's 2.5 times bigger than the studio at the BBC. I have to say that was partly put in because of the chairman of our interviewing panel. Just to give him an idea of... it's the equivalent to Oxford Circus. So this is serious stuff. This is phenomenal. This is a wonderful site. So the dome, which is 16 metres wide, the opening is 8 metres wide. But what we were saying then, here we have this platform where the museum can have many different events, whether it's BAFTA awards or whether or not parts of the collection actually were to move up from below the exhibition space and have special installations. It could be done. Ai Weiwei comes in, whoever felt. Clearly, there's many, many different potentials. But I think importantly, there's this incubator crust, this crust that actually wraps around the actual roof, under the roof itself. And we're saying the possibilities of engaging the community, many different uses, design, history, research could actually be happening actually within that crust. That's really what's very much an important part of our proposals. So this is just a cross section, just showing the here we have, these are 7 meters tall. These are beautiful. This is what took our breath away. These are amazing spaces under here with vast potential. Here, that's the area that we're lifting the possibility of. And again, I would say these are all proposals that have got to be talked about in much more detail. So I don't know how many people have been down the, obviously Crossrail are working in it at the moment. These fantastic cavernous spaces underground. And I think, as Joe said, if you carry on through there and down, you've got the River Fleet at the end there. Now, on the other side of this wall, I'll come on to that. So here we have the vaults, and this is just an idea of keeping the rawness of the lower space. And again, I think as architects, we were very wary of getting involved too much with the exhibition design because that's not been talked about. All we're saying, there's a huge potential here to start developing ideas of catacombs. I mean, the double height volumes. It's unlimited, really. And just we showed 1 or 2 images of here. Certainly, there are apertures existing on the floor of the general market that will be able to bring light down into the space as well. If you've seen a bunch of architects run like little kids, we were down there and the first underground train, and we all ran to this area, this aperture. And what clearly we were all aware of then, that part of the museum experience will be able to look through an aperture and actually see the underground train. Now, I know that's not one, but clearly the original trains that would have actually brought meat to the market, there's a siding, the original siding is there, and we wondered whether or not it was possible to loan one of the objects from the Transport Museum that could put there, so you could see the original trains and you could see the underground trains as well. So you can hear this. So you have the water from the fleet, all these experiences. This sort of it's a very, very central sort of space, which can only get better. Now there's the plan. There's the opening, the dome, we'll call it. We're saying there can be now this central street, and this could be the Museum of London's 100 best objects or 10 best objects, or to tell the story with the best objects, but the story in 100 objects. And that's the sort of potential space for the permanent galleries. We're then saying, I don't think that, is we tunnel under the tunnel. And because at the moment here we have the tracks running through there, we actually said, I think it was you, Julian, wasn't it? We said, well, why the hell? Because this is the question, this would be the architects are all, but how do you link? And of course, tunnels are being built all over London. So we said, well, of course, and we were working with some friendly engineers. We know that can be done. And I have to say, all of our scheme is predicated on spending time with engineers who have supported all our proposals. And I think, Sharon, all the schemes had engineers study them, yeah? For the viability of that. So we tunnel under, and then we move through into the the spaces underneath the Poultry Market. And there is that link, West Poultry link. And so this is the move we're saying here. You've moved down, the tunnel moves through, and we now move through into that West Poultry link here. We've opened up here, and then we can move into the vaults underneath the Poultry Market. So we've come out of the tunnel here. Here we've got the entrance to the vaults underneath the Poultry Market. We take part of the floor away here, and you exit from the Poultry Market, you're looking down, and we move straight through, and we'll come to a Sunken Garden. So the upper level of the Museum of London entrance is there. Entering into the poultry wing itself, I mean, there's all these existing columns and doors. You know, again, how rough and raw this actually ends up being, and again, we haven't really talked about with the museum, but that gives you an idea of the spaces that exist. I mean, frankly, you could go in and just put a show straight in as it is. And they have these phenomenal doors. I mean, these are as sexy as they get. I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. I mean, they're going to be central. I mean, you don't actually need any objects in there. We could just walk around. Okay. We got this?
Well, we need to start.
Okay, all right, very quickly. So I'm going to... so this is an idea. There's the temporary exhibition space. Here we're now above ground. This is the link between the two buildings. Port authorities, wouldn't it be bloody nice if you could actually exit from Crossrail straight through into here, but perhaps that's a debate to be had. Now, this here, we said this little bit here, Smithfield, we take that out, which seemed to be quite appropriate, because this historically, you can see the link through and the tunnel under there. Actually, before the fire, you can actually see that was actually Poultry Market before it was burnt. So there we now have, this is the Red House, the engine room, and the link through to this Sunken Garden. And we're then saying that, well, you can see the link through. How long have I got? I've got a couple of minutes.
We're cutting in.
All right, okay, all right, I'm going to be quick. But there are these tunnels under there. This is the state of it at the moment. There, again, the tracks are running underneath here, so you've got this iron building that was put over the top later on. This is later than Horace Jones, but this used to be a cold house here for sort of refrigerators in London. That's how we started developing. This is important. This element here, we lift it up and we put it above ground. We're picking up on the geometry again. They're ideas. So we then developed that. What we're quite excited about is the potential to have an indoor theatre, outdoor theatre, and the public realm. And all of this is dissolving the difference. You know, the public realm, inside and outside, it's one of the same thing at this lower level, at this ground level. And then you move up, and we were saying there could be rooftop terraces overlooking the dome. We talked about actually having cast bricks, possibly, referencing ice houses. And, but anyway, again, they're really just ideas, and these are the links through. As you can see, this is a complicated project, and here this sums up the scheme here. We're saying the engine room can be coffee bars, you can come down, the garden at the lower level, you'll be able to be in the permanent gallery, look through at the trains here. This is where all the research laboratories are for the new excavations that have been found. We've got performance spaces, storage, and kids arriving here. We've got a whole area for coaches and schoolrooms and education rooms. And then finally, many different options of Hart's Corner that was bombed in the Second World War. This is the one part that was hit, and you can see here Horace Jones' scheme. We were saying what could be done there. We didn't really, there are many different options. Obviously, this is a Rachel White read, I'm not saying that, but could that be reinterpreted in a different way? Because clearly, Farringdon Road and the site itself is looking for a marker at that point. And I don't know, Julian, we'll talk about restoration, repair and strategies. We can come on to that. Obviously, you know, the cast iron, wrought iron columns there, the phoenix columns are in there. So there's many different types of materials we can explore and express. I'm going to finish now. And obviously you've got the history of activities that go on, which obviously can now all be brought back and brought into play. This is the fleet. We are saying that we could potentially have this rill running down. I will just go back one slide. We're suggesting a well here that all the water from the site can be drawn through and actually fed back into the Fleet River, so you'll be able to listen in the well and hear the fleet. We would love to have actually an excavation underground, so you could actually move from the underground space to the fleet. And then finally, I suppose this sums it up. Here we have the first image we had of the market, the meat market, the 1760s coming through, and then you had 1870s, 80s, right? We're saying now the lifeblood of Smithfield is actually moving from west to east, where the development historically went from east to west.
Brilliant.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Before we get on to a couple of quick questions, Julian and Joe, I know, Julian, you were trailed wanting to possibly talk about a few things around the historic fabric.
Well, thank you very much. It's just really so exciting to be involved in picking up the story of two buildings which have been through two public inquiries to try and knock them down. And so the fact that we're now enabled and have the opportunity to find a new future to them with a museum is absolutely incredible. I think what one's got to say is that all the interventions that Paul has described so elegantly are all based on an assessment of the existing fabric, so that we could look, if you like, for the weak points, the points where we could make an intervention to meet the brief in such a way that the building was left to represent itself as an old derelict market abandoned by the city in 1993, over this layer of archaeology, the excavation into, if you like, the detritus outside the city walls. And that great envelope below is as important as the buildings above. So the contribution that the building makes to the whole conservation area is, in a way, rather like the impact of Haussmann in Paris. The photograph that Paul showed right at the beginning shows a medieval city with this great introduction. And so the special thing about West Smithfield is that the regimented sequence of pavilions that marches to the west is then actually engaged with Farringdon Road. Farringdon Road is at an angle to the axis of the pavilions, and therefore you have a special element added to the case of buildings which enclose the general market and the dome.
Thank you very much. Aziz, maybe would you like to contribute on your part of it? Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you. Good morning. Good evening.
Well, I think both Julie and Joe and Paul and Sharon just really gave you a glimpse of how exciting a project this is going to be. I mean, as everyone said, this is right at the beginning, and this is really a sort of a heart, really, which hasn't beaten for a long time. This building, and that's our job to sort of inject the blood back in, and start to kind of bring it back to life. There's a bit of surgery that's going to go on, and actually then it's the job to keep this thing alive. And some of the things that Paul mentioned there, the street theatre, the kind of the way the public realm is going to really bleed into the city and allow the city in to a museum in a way a museum hasn't taken the city in before. This idea of an incubator, the idea of the museum being something which generates kind of knowledge for the city's future, is almost like an idea of the model of a university, kind of a 12th century universities where city leaders would create universities as a way of kind of generating new forms of knowledge for the society and tackling issues which were issues of the day. So, I mean, every aspect of this, from the collection to the public interaction with that collection, to the kind of the relationship with Horace Jones and the kind of amazing archaeology, the living archaeology of Smithfield's market, the kind of 800-year smooth field. It's just thrilling. I mean, so you can say I'm kind of every nerve in my body gets tingled when I speak about this project. It's just so exciting to be part of it.
Great, fantastic, thank you. I think there's a lot of passion that's coming through from everybody, that's for sure. So we've got a lucky person that's going to ask the one question that we're going to have at Q&A. So you better make it good, whoever you are. So who's going to ask this question? Yes, sir, the gentleman on the front row, second row. So let's get the Q&A. And we're going to keep it brief, and then we'll have a brief answer.
Morning, Stephen Frame from Bureau 4. Question for Sharon. You've got such a fantastic resonant site here with wonderful architecture that we've seen, and individually the history of Smithfield is so strong. I'm just interested to know how you might consider approaching it curatorially, given that you've got a much bigger story than just Smithfield to tell.
Yes, the kind of interesting thing that's going to happen over the next months is the kind of the curatorial team that we've been holding back will now get to grips with the design team, and we've just appointed Ralph Applebaum Associates to work with us on an interpretation master plan. So we have many ways of many options for telling the story of London. This, not least of which is the necessity to talk about this through our objects, of which we have many, but also, the kind of breadth of London and the scale of the subject. So it's going to be a process of honing down, really. What I do know is, and we've got millions of ways in which we could do this. So all our ideas are now going to be thrown into the pot, and we haven't really spoken before. I mean, we've met each other twice now, I think, 3 times. So the kind of OG process.
It's a bit like getting married when you're in a few days.
It's an arranged marriage, and we did a kind of strange interview. So that is the next stage, just kind of big ideas, time, and eventually a kind of beautiful baby will pop out.
And Sharon...
No, I didn't mean it like that.
I didn't think that was positive either.
You heard it here first, folks. Sharon and I have also been having a conversation about the temporary museum that you'll be doing as well, the Meanwhile Museum. That you'll be doing.
I mean, you know, this is we're getting our heads round what it actually means to run 2 sites. And that's a great opportunity because we have this working model that we can test and pilot ideas with the public before they go into the new museum. Many organisations don't have that luxury. So we have this living model. But there's going to be this kind of twilight zone, obviously, some point, I don't know how long it will be, as we move right up into the kind of relocation. So how we then, this kind of meanwhile, meantime, I think Pat coined the phrase, meantime museum. What would that mean in those times when our current site is not festooned with objects? And how can we get out and about into the suburbs, into the wider London and do things differently?
You did actually say that the possibility of actually using the Smithfield site itself as temporary installations and events that take place. So really the idea would be to get the public in as quickly as possible.
Get your thinking
really
caps on, folks. Get your thinking caps on for everybody here, and it's Good London Festival of Architecture hub coming up in the future, I reckon. Brilliant, thank you. You know, the tingle is shared by everybody, Asif, and you know, I think the audience, our guests this morning as well. I think it's an incredible project. It's the Museum of London in every sense of the word, isn't it? You know, the strata of London, the history of London, the people of London, the sort of the very fabric, the hydrology. And we're sorry we couldn't bring you in to talk more about the public realm, but clearly that's also being thought about so well. But mostly it's about the people and the passion of London, I think, that has really come through today. And the sort of the layering of all of that, the palimpsest of what has made London, and sort of the brilliant team that we have got who's taking that on to the next generation, the next layer of the palimpsest. So thank you everybody for you being here, being patient. I'm sorry we didn't have any Q&A, but the meat was the most important, literally, in this particular instance. So thank you, Aziz, for your patience, and continue to enjoy your day in Japan. Let's thank the panel in the normal way.